Hello, I'm Hank Hine from the Dali Museum, and you're watching Tampa Bay Community Network.
Hello, I'm Linda Saul-Sena, and thank you for tuning in to Culture Vultures. It is my great pleasure today to have a longtime friend, Hank Hine, the director of the Dali Museum and a man who's bringing great things to our community. Thank you, Hank, for being with us today.
Linda, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be with you and a pleasure to be on your show. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So tell me, what is happening these days at the Dali Museum?
Well, we have a wonderful Disney and Dali exhibition. We have been following a program of looking at Dali in relation to other major artistic figures, and happily we found that Dali and Disney collaborated at one point, so we have created an exhibition around that.
That is completely wild. I had no idea that they worked together.
They did. In the 1940s, Dali had gone out to Hollywood. He'd come to America like a lot of European artists and writers, leaving Hitler's Europe and coming to the States. And he found his way to Hollywood. He wanted to work with whom he called American surrealists. And those were W.H. Griffith, Hitchcock, and the Marx Brothers.
That's interesting that he thought of filmmakers as artists and as surrealists.
Oh, he did. And he included Disney in that group, too. And so he actually was at Jack Warner's house in Hollywood, where he had painted Warner's portrait by commission. And he met Disney at that place, at Warner's house. And Disney had seen Dali's images and had a great respect for his draftsmanship and asked if he would do a project with him in the studio.
That's so wild, because just offhand I would have thought Disney and Warner were competitors.
Yes, I think they could have been, but there was such an overlap of careers in Hollywood as there is still.
But that's so interesting that two creative people recognized that in the other.
Yes.
And wanted to collaborate.
And they did collaborate. Dali worked for 18 months on this project, but at a certain point, the market wasn't right, the temperaments weren't quite right, and Disney withdrew from the project.
Do we have any images of it?
Yes, there were 18 seconds of animation actually made, and then 40 years later, 50 years later, Disney's nephew, Roy Disney, Walt Disney's nephew, Roy Disney, named after his brother Roy, decided he was going to resurrect the project. And they created an animation based on those 17 seconds, based on the storyboards which Dali and his collaborator John Hench at Disney had created. And they made the story in a contemporary animated way, and it's the best Disney, and it's one of the most interesting Dalis. It's really fabulous.
What a cool combination. That's great.
Yeah. And right now it's only available as a release with Fantasia. Mm-hmm. It was actually part of that era when they made Fantasia, and that was what Dali was, or Disney was thinking about.
Well, Fantasia is pretty surreal.
It's very surreal, yeah. And really subsequent works from the Disney studio continued to be surreal. But not to give the credit just to the surrealists, animation, with characters talking and, the sudden changes of things, the way, somebody will have their nose poked in, it'll come out the other side. Those kind of metamorphoses really appealed to the surrealists. So they were inspired by American animation as well as vice versa.
You come up with the most interesting shows. I'm always amazed at how they absolutely relate to Dali, but they're in so many different directions. Do you work with your curator to develop those?
The possibilities are just endless. Dali was involved in so many things, and he's so much in the middle of all of our era's concerns, of science and fashion and architecture, painting, sculpture, writing. We can just go in so many directions. There's always something interesting to explore with Dali as a base.
Well, I was amazed when I first visited the new museum in St. Petersburg to see the architecture of it. And you told me it was based on science. Would you share that?
Well, it does. It is based on science. We were faced with a dilemma. We hired Jan Weymouth, an excellent architect who had worked with I.M. Pei on the Louvre in Paris and on the National Gallery in Washington. And his firm was perfect for this, the Greater firm, because they're based in St. Louis and they're known for making stadia, public arenas, very strong structures that are just aimed at safety and utility. So we were able to bring in an architect who has a sense of fantasy with a firm that builds really reliable buildings. Because as you know, Linda, we're in this earthquake, hurricane zone. I think, as a matter of fact, we've shared some kind of retreats from hurricanes over the years. I remember the one in 2004 where everything on Davis Island was shut down, and we ended up after 3 or 4 days at 4 green fields, which seemed like civilization. They had electric power, air conditioning, hamburgers. It was great.
So the building that they created has this fabulous staircase in the center.
Yes.
What is that staircase about?
Well, I requested that we have a staircase that referenced Dali's interest in DNA. And Dali had a profound kind of spiritual connection to DNA. He said that the fact that such a beautiful form, and you remember it's this double helix that twines together the 2 spirals going in opposite directions, so that if it were a staircase, you would never meet. You would keep seeing another person on the other side and never join until you got to the ground. He said it proved that God exists because such a beautiful form would be in every living thing. So not only did he feel a fascination and affinity for that, but he also made great friends with the discoverer of that, Francis Crick. And
Dali and Crick were friends.
Wonderful friends. Actually, Crick came to see him at the St. Regis Hotel where Dali lived. He spent half his time in New York at the St. Regis and half his time in Spain. So Crick wrote him a note and sent it to his room, and the note said, "Would you like to meet the second smartest person in the world?"
I'm sure that appealed to his ego.
It did. Can you imagine? How could you resist? So he came down and greeted Crick, and they became lifetime friends. So I wanted to create a double helix. As you know how museums work, they very happily have a governing board of practical, civic-minded people, and they asked me the very frank question, how much more than a single helix does a double helix cost? I said, well, double. And they said, you get a single helix for the Dali Museum. So we have this beautiful staircase, which I think Jan Weymouth designed in a beautiful way. It goes up to the exhibition floor, which is actually the 3rd floor, well above the floodplain, well above the hurricane plain, and then keeps twisting upwards in this beautiful gesture towards the heavens. So in the end, I think we're very lucky to have that beautiful staircase.
In terms of form and design, I think it's one of the most exciting places in the Bay Area. I really love it. And it strikes me as having been difficult to create, but I'm so glad that you all figured out how to do it because it's really stunning. And then to be able to look out over the water from there is just beautiful.
That was very important to us when we moved there because the natural affinity that people have for water. Dali was very engaged with the waterfront in his homeland. He lived right on the beach in Port Legat, Spain. So we thought we had to be there. Interestingly, AOL online has called the Dali Museum one of the 10 buildings you must see in your lifetime.
What an honor. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great.
And I think more and more people in the Bay Area are coming. It used to be, Linda, that the Dali Museum was really driven by outside visitors. Mm-hmm. And we know that's still true. If you go anywhere in the world and you say you're from St. Petersburg, they say, oh, the Dali Museum. So we are kind of the gateway, certainly to St. Petersburg and to some extent to the whole Bay Area region. When we were first exploring who we could be for the Bay Area, we did depend on those outside visitors, but more and more through our marketing and through the shows that we've been putting together, very interesting exhibitions year after year, we've been drawing a higher and higher percentage of Bay Area visitors, even as our total numbers have gone up. We had 400,000 visitors last year. We're the most visited museum in Florida.
That is completely fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
400,000 means you get a sign on the interstate.
Yes, it does.
Which is a big deal.
Yeah, yeah.
But you've always done such imaginative outreach and marketing. You really have.
Well, we're really cooking right at the moment, and we've kind of found what people need to know about our shows and a great way of reaching them.
It's such a dynamic place. I was fascinated when I visited to see that you've really taken Dali's Spanish roots to you've played with them in a variety of ways, from your great cafe with wonderful Spanish food to the exterior. Would you mind describing how you've integrated his background in the exterior?
Well, the exterior, we largely wanted to create a garden that would give you a sense both of the Mediterranean, Dali's home, mm-hmm. and our own subtropical flora. So we created a garden that had a very formal aspect. It has a labyrinth, a hedge labyrinth, made, of course, with a Florida plant, podocarpus, which so many of us have as hedges.
And it's really dense.
It's very dense, yeah. And it's wonderful because it's built on a slope. So as you go into the labyrinth, you're going downwards into it. So the hedge, which is an even height, so it looks like it's just a flat surface, it gets higher and higher.
And that's surreal.
Yeah, it's very surreal until finally you're totally surrounded. And that's when the spirit of the labyrinth takes over, because a labyrinth, as opposed to a maze, has no wrong turns. There are no cul-de-sacs, there's no error, there's no place you're going to get stuck, but you can't see your way. So you just have to have the faith to go forward, and you finally arrive at the center of the labyrinth.
I did not know that. I'd never known there was a distinction. I'd never gotten stuck in there, but I didn't know that that's why.
Yeah.
I thought it was just blind luck.
Yeah. Well, actually, when we were designing it, we copied the labyrinth at Chartres Cathedral, and I had kind of a wicked impulse to make one wrong turn, and we actually laid out the hedges with that. And then my wife saw it and she said, "You can't do that. That's wrong, because you're leading people on, and then you're going to trap them in this little cul-de-sac." So we had to fill that in, and now it's a true labyrinth, and perseverance is all it takes.
I love it. I also love the tree you have out there where people write. Describe that.
Well, we call it the wish tree, and it's an old tradition going back to the old axiom mundi, the idea that there's this central axis that goes from the subterranean world through our world into the heavens. And cultures have always revered trees for their sense of being rooted in the earth and being beautiful and then reaching upwards. So the Scottish people did this. Lots of cultures have hung things on trees. So we call this our wish tree, and we invite our visitors to write a wish and hang it on the tree. And
it's laden.
It is laden. There are thousands of wishes, and they're very inspirational because there are very few "Go Bucks" or "Go Rays." I hope the Rays win. No, their wishes like, I hope my daughter can get out of this abusive relationship, or I hope to see my mother again in heaven. You know?
Oh, wow.
So it's the kind of thing that we as a people used to go to temples and churches for, and somehow museums have taken a part of that role, of that sense of interconnectedness to the world and bringing it out. And they're very, very touching, and of course, they're not signed, so they're wonderful anonymous wishes.
That's beautiful. So a friend was asking me the other day, does the Dali Museum in St. Petersburg contain the best collection of his work in the world?
Yes.
I thought so.
Yes, it does, yeah. It's really unparalleled. We work very closely with the Dali Foundation, which was given the charge of Dali's intellectual property by the Spanish government. Because when Dali died, he made the Kingdom of Spain,
Yes.
his heir. So they created.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
He didn't have children, and
He didn't have children. Yeah, and his wife had died before him.
Mm-hmm.
Dali was unconventional in many ways. His wife was 10 years older than he was, and he was also completely monogamous his entire life. So he's a great contrast to, say, Picasso, or
Oh, yes.
the stereotype that we have of profligate artists.
Right.
He was very focused on Gala, his wife.
So Spain got the papers, and you have the paintings.
Well, they have paintings too, and they've been very, very ambitious and very successful in buying paintings and adding to their collection. But the real virtue of our collection is that it's got the most important works from each era. So you can see Dali from the time that he was doing what all young artists do, which is copying the avant-garde of the time, which happened to be Fauvism and Impressionism, and then his Cubist period and his Surreal period, and then his period that he called molecular.
Right.
What was it? You were there Sunday. What is it called? The molecular mysticism.
Right.
Yeah.
His work is so varied and so compelling, but I find that your audio guides really enrich it, or a docent, because there's so much thought put into it. I have to tell you, when I was growing up, my mother was very dismissive of Dali because she saw him promoting himself and she thought, oh, he's just very commercial. And it wasn't until I took your tour and saw the thought that went into all of his work to realize he was self-promotional, but he was also a hell of an artist. He was
Yes.
a really excellent and provocative
Yeah.
and revolutionary artist.
Right. Well, it's true. And your mother was very much an expression of the same era that I've come out of, because when I was in school, we weren't even shown Dali.
Right.
The faculty had the same idea that your mother had, that he was self-promoting. And I think also in the university academic side, his politics were wrong, because he wasn't part of the Republic.
Right.
He stayed away from that, and as a matter of fact, by staying away, people thought, well, you're supporting fascism. Like many artists, he really was apolitical. And I have found over my life working with artists for 50 years that you can't trust their politics. They live in a different world, and they will espouse political views, but they're not necessarily to be argued with or embraced. So Dali
That's not
fell out
usually
of
where they're
favor.
put their energy.
That's not where their energy is, and they need solutions. They're problem solvers, so they look for a solution, and I understand that. So Dali was not shown in the Academy, and it wasn't until after his death, and I think the Dali Museum's been a big part of it, getting people to look at the work away from the shadow of this personality.
Right. Right.
Because it was the personality that was turning people off, but the work is, uncontroversibly major and one of the most important visions of the 20th century.
And you have programs to expand upon the work at the museum. What are some of your sorts of programs that you offer?
Well, I have to start with my favorite, which is the Junior Docent Program. And in that program, and this was started by Peter Tush, our education coordinator years ago. And when I came to the museum, I was taken with it, but I didn't really understand why it was so wonderful. The essence of the program is you bring in kids and you let them choose a painting.
Like what age kids?
This is, it turned out that this is the age 9 to 12, which happens to be one of the most vulnerable demographics. These are kids, who have not reached puberty. They don't have all the possessions of the society. They see everything. They're bombarded by media. So they wonder, who am I? And they have a terrible lack of self-esteem. And I was explaining what we did. We bring in the kids, you choose a painting, and now we'll have teachers work with you to establish a vocabulary about how you feel about this painting. Tell us how you feel.
Wow.
And then you present it to your peers. And in so doing, they learn a tremendous amount of confidence in themselves. They build their self-esteem. And I was telling the dean of the College of Psychology at USF Medical Center about our program, and he said, what you're dealing with this epidemic of lack of self-esteem. And so we started exploring our program and found, with their help, we started testing incoming and
Pre and
outgoing.
post, yeah.
And they were significantly increasing their sense of self-esteem.
That's fantastic. I remember being that age, and I'm so glad I don't have to repeat it.
Yeah.
But to use art in that fashion is so great, and the fact that they get to select which image they'll expand upon.
And my theory is that the clincher in this is being able then to take it and talk about it to others. That's that civic connection, that connection to other people. And I think that's what creates great citizens, and that's what creates the sense of, we can make the world better, we can be responsible for ourselves, I matter. And we've seen terrific results from that program.
That is great. And so each year you get a new bunch of students?
Our problem is keeping the returns out, because so many parents love what's happened to their kids that they send them back, and we have to screen that. But we provide scholarships for kids who haven't had the opportunity
That's
to do this.
great. How many junior docents do you take at a time?
There are 20 in each session, and we have
Yes.
5 sessions through the summer, so 100 each summer.
I get to chat with a number of people involved with different institutions. I'm thinking they all should do that. That is a wonderful program. Very cool.
I think you could build a whole educational program around it, remembering that the essential aspect of this is to take what you've learned and give it back to others.
Love it. That's great. What other programs do you have?
Okay, the other ones. We have lifelong programs. Our docents, God bless them, we have 200 docents.
So docents are the volunteers who walk visitors through your galleries and explain the work.
And they take a college course in contemporary art and Dali.
Wow.
And then they give their time and their vision to the visitors.
Do they pay to participate in that?
No, they don't pay to participate.
So they get educated by your curators, I guess, and then they volunteer a certain number of hours a month?
Yes, and it's up to them. I think there's a minimum that our
Right.
program requires, but we have some that are there 3 times a week and some that are there once a month.
Wow.
But
Wow.
they're the backbone of our relation to the public, because everyone who comes usually takes a docent tour. They're free. Our docent tours are free, and our headphone tours are free. The garden tours are free.
Great. Because it's so much more meaningful to understand the work through one of those mediums. If you just look at it, it's really interesting. But I found that I enjoy it more when I have somebody giving me the background, because Dali put so much energy into creating the work. Right. There's so much thought behind it. Right. And you also have great parties, don't you? Yes. I see the pictures.
We do have great parties. We have volunteers parties, probably the best.
Really?
We put on a party for the volunteers, but we have parties around the exhibit openings, and that's why membership is such a great thing. Our members, and we have an immense number of members now.
How many members?
7,000 families.
Whoa,
Yeah.
that is significantly more than any other museum. That's fantastic.
I think it's because of the parties. We have great opening parties, and great opportunities for members to experience poetry readings and concerts and lectures. We have morning lectures and people from the outside coming in. For instance, just in this era, we have the director of the Fine Arts Museum of Havana coming to talk at the Dali.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I think I heard you have yoga in the studios.
We do. We have yoga on Sundays at noon, and it's immensely popular. They come at noon, and after the yoga class, they go through the galleries. So they get the yin and the yang together.
That is absolutely wonderful. And they can have lunch in the cafe.
Lunch in the cafe, right, and a docent tour.
So, briefly, what did you do before being the director of the Dali?
Actually, I was hired from the board. I was a trustee of the Dali Museum while I was...
I didn't realize that.
At that time, I was director of USF's graphics studio.
Right.
And that's when we met.
Yes,
Back
yes.
in, I won't say how long
It's
ago.
been a long
It was more
time.
than 3 or 4 years.
That's why we're longtime friends. And haven't you seen this area, Tampa Bay, evolve culturally in your time here?
It's amazing. If you just look at one thing, groceries. When I came to the area, I remember a friend saying that she had gone, she had also been in California, as I was, and she had gone to the market and she had asked the butcher for a free-range chicken. And the butcher said, "A what?" She said, a chicken that goes where it wants and eats what it wants. And he said, "Honey, somebody's been pulling your leg. There's no such thing."
Wow.
That's not the way we raise chickens. And now, our markets are the same as New York and Chicago and Los Angeles and San Francisco.
I would think that the demographics among your visitors are just stellar. Really, you're a global destination.
Yes, we are. We have people from the Americas. We have people from Europe. Of course, the largest national group outside the United States is Canada. And we get those wonderful neighbors of ours from the north coming down to enjoy the great weather, and they come to the Dali as well.
The thing that's so civilized is being able to come in, be very stimulated by the work, which is so provocative and challenging and interesting, and then to go outside and just inhale the bay breezes, take in the view of the yacht basin next door, have something in the cafe. You really offer visitors a complete experience.
And then write a wish on the wish tree.
Absolutely. It's beautiful.
We had a visitor who wrote to us from Germany who said, "I want you to know that the wish tree works. I made a wish when I was in St. Petersburg, and last week it came true. And I will be married on the 14th.
Oh, that's charming. That's so lovely. That's great. That is a great story about the wish tree. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And thank you all for watching Culture Vultures.